There is a reason why you keep starting things, and somehow you never finish them. And it is not random. It is not just a bad phase. It is not just a lack of motivation that will magically disappear one day. There is a pattern behind it, a silent pattern, that has been shaping the way your mind works for a long time. There is also a reason why your mind feels full, even when you are not doing anything important. A constant noise, thoughts overlapping thoughts, ideas starting, but never completing. A feeling that something is always unfinished, always pending, always unresolved. And then the day begins. You wake up already a little tired. You move through your routine, jumping from one thing to another. You try to focus, but your attention slips away. You try to stay consistent, but something always interrupts you. And when the night comes, there is that uncomfortable silence, that moment where you look back at your day and ask yourself a question that feels heavier every time. What did I actually do today that moved my life forward? And most of the time, there is no clear answer, just activity, just movement, just mental exhaustion, but no real progress. Now listen carefully, because this is where most people misunderstand everything. You are not in this situation because you are lazy. You are not here because you lack discipline. You are not here because you are not capable enough. In fact, the truth is much more uncomfortable than that. Your mind has been trained into this state. You did not wake up one day like this. You were conditioned slowly, repeatedly, consistently, pulled in too many directions at the same time, exposed to constant stimulation without pause, interrupted before you could even complete a single line of thought, rewarded for speed, but never trained for depth, surrounded by noise for so long. That silence now feels strange, almost threatening. And when a mind lives like this long enough, something begins to change, not on the surface, but at a deeper level. It starts losing its ability to stay, to remain, to sustain attention, to hold a direction long enough, to build something meaningful. And the most dangerous part is not even that. The most dangerous part is what comes next. You start believing that this is who you are. You start telling yourself things like, I am just not focused. I have always been like this. I can't stay consistent. And slowly, what was once a pattern becomes your identity. And when something becomes your identity, you stop trying to change it. But let me be very clear with you right now. This is not who you are. This is what you were trained to become. And anything that was trained can be retrained. Now, if you want to understand how to take your mind out of this constant state of confusion, if you want to stop feeling mentally exhausted without results, if you want to build a mindset that is capable of focus, clarity, and real discipline, then you need to pay attention to what comes next. Because this is not about motivation. This is not about temporary inspiration. This is about understanding how your mind is actually functioning right now. And more importantly, how to take back control of it. So before we go any further, subscribe to the channel. Because every single day, you are going to find content here that will challenge the way you think, strengthen your mental structure, and accelerate your process of building a focused, disciplined, and resilient mind. And like this video, because there are thousands of people right now living in the same mental chaos, thinking that they are the problem, when in reality, they were just never taught how their mind works. Now, let's go deeper. Because what you are dealing with is not a lack of discipline. It is a brain that has been operating in survival mode for far too long. And a brain in survival mode does not care about your goals. It does not care about your plans. It does not care about your long-term vision. It cares about one thing only: immediate relief, avoiding discomfort, escaping pressure, and reacting as fast as possible to anything that feels like a threat. And here is the problem. In the modern world, your brain is being exposed to hundreds of micro threats every single day. Notifications, messages, information overload, endless comparisons, artificial urgency, and your system does not know the difference between real danger and digital stimulation, so it reacts the same way. It stays alert, it stays tense, it stays overloaded. And when your brain is constantly in this state, it cannot build. It can only react. So every time you try to focus, your brain pulls you away. Every time you try to stay consistent, your brain looks for escape. Every time you try to do something meaningful, your brain looks for something easier, faster, more comfortable. And then you think the problem is you, but it is not. Habit 1: anchor your day. Before you try to change your entire life, before you try to fix your lack of focus, your inconsistency, your scattered attention, and the feeling that you are always behind, there is something much smaller, much quieter, and yet infinitely more powerful that you need to understand with absolute clarity. The way you start your day is not just a detail of your routine. It is the foundation of your mental state. It is the invisible structure that defines how your brain will operate for the next 12 to 16 hours. And most people lose control of that structure before their mind even has the chance to wake up. Because the moment they open their eyes, they do not pause, they do not breathe, they do not think, they react. Almost automatically, without intention, without awareness, their hand reaches for the phone, and before they even realize what is happening, they are already consuming, already responding, already being pulled into a world that demands their attention before they had the chance to claim it for themselves. Messages start appearing, notifications start lighting up, information starts flooding in, and in a matter of minutes, something subtle but extremely important is lost. The silence of the morning, the clarity of the beginning, the space where the mind could organize itself before being invaded by noise. And once that space is gone, the entire day changes. Because you did not start your day, you entered it already reacting, already responding, already mentally behind. And from that point on, everything becomes a chain reaction. One stimulus leads to another. One distraction opens the door for the next. One interruption fragments your attention just enough to make the next task harder. And without noticing, you spend the entire day trying to recover a sense of control that you never established in the first place. That is why this habit is not about productivity. It is about authority, mental authority, the ability to decide how your mind begins, instead of allowing the world to decide for you. And the mistake most people make here is believing that this needs to be complex, structured, optimized, or impressive in some way, as if waking up earlier, adding more tasks, or following a rigid routine would somehow create discipline. But that approach fails, not because it is wrong, but because it is unsustainable for a mind that is already overwhelmed. What you need is not complexity. What you need is control. And control begins with something extremely simple, but deeply intentional. 10 minutes. 10 minutes where nothing external is allowed to enter. No phone, no conversation, no information, no urgency. Just you and your own mind, in its natural state before the world interferes. And in those 10 minutes, something begins to reorganize internally. Your breathing slows down. Your thoughts become more visible. Your attention stops jumping from one point to another and starts settling. And for the first time in the day, you are not reacting. You are present. You can sit quietly and observe. You can write a few sentences about what matters today. You can reflect on what you want to prioritize. You can pray, if that is part of your life. You can simply exist without being pulled in multiple directions. The action itself is not the most important part. The intention behind it is. Because what you are doing in that moment is not just creating a calm morning. You are training your brain to operate differently. You are activating the part of your mind responsible for decision-making and control before the reactive systems take over. You are telling your nervous system that today will not start in chaos. And this may seem small, almost insignificant when you look at it from the outside, but internally, it creates a shift that expands throughout your entire day. Because the way you enter your day becomes the way you experience it. If you enter your day in reaction, everything feels urgent, fragmented, and out of control. If you enter your day with intention, even difficult situations are processed differently. You respond instead of react. You decide instead of follow. You stay instead of escape. But there is something you need to be ready for. This will not feel comfortable at the beginning. In fact, it will feel unnatural. You will sit in silence and feel the impulse to reach for your phone almost immediately. You will feel a subtle anxiety, a sense that you should be doing something else, something more productive, something more stimulating. You may even feel like you are wasting time. But you are not. What you are feeling is the effect of a mind that has been conditioned to depend on constant stimulation. A mind that forgot how to stay still. A mind that became uncomfortable with its own presence. And when you remove the noise, it reacts. It resists. It tries to pull you back into what is familiar. And this is exactly the point where most people stop. Not because it is difficult in a physical sense, but because it is uncomfortable in a psychological one. There is no instant reward, no immediate feedback, no visible progress, just silence and the confrontation with your own mind. But if you stay, if you continue showing up for those 10 minutes every day, something begins to change in a very real and measurable way. Your mind starts to slow down more easily. Your attention becomes more stable. Your decisions become more intentional. You stop feeling like you are chasing your own day, and instead, you begin to lead it. And over time, this small habit becomes something much bigger than a morning practice. It becomes a shift in identity. You are no longer someone who wakes up and reacts. You become someone who wakes up and takes control. Habit 2, intentional pause. If the first habit teaches you how to start your day with control, this second habit teaches you something even more difficult for the modern mind: how to stop without feeling guilty. Because somewhere along the way, without you even noticing, you were taught that being busy means being productive, that being constantly active means you are moving forward, and that stopping, even for a moment, means you are falling behind. And this belief is so deeply embedded that most people do not even question it anymore. They wake up already thinking about what needs to be done. They move from one task to another without pause. They fill every gap with some form of stimulation. And when there is finally a moment of stillness, they immediately try to escape it, not because they need to, but because they do not know how to stay in it. But here is something that almost no one tells you. Your brain was never designed to operate in continuous performance. It was not built to maintain high levels of focus and output for hours without interruption. It functions in cycles, natural biological cycles of energy, attention, and recovery. And each one of these cycles has a limit, usually somewhere between 90 and 120 minutes. After that point, something begins to change. Your attention weakens. Your thoughts become slower. Your mind starts drifting. You feel the urge to stand up, to check something, to move away from what you are doing. And most people interpret this as a problem, as a lack of discipline, as procrastination. So they respond the only way they were taught to respond. They push harder. They force more effort. They add more pressure. They reach for coffee. They open more tabs. They try to override the signal. But what they do not understand is that this signal is not a weakness. It is a message from your brain telling you that it has reached the end of a cycle and that it needs recovery before it can perform again. And when you ignore that message, you do not become more productive. You become more exhausted, because the brain that needed 5 minutes of real recovery receives more stimulation instead, more noise, more input, more cognitive load. And instead of resetting, it accumulates fatigue. So the next cycle begins weaker, and the next one even weaker, until you reach a point where you are physically present, but mentally drained. You are sitting in front of your work, but nothing moves. You try to focus, but your mind slips away. You try to think, but everything feels heavy. And at the end of the day, you are not just tired. You are mentally depleted. And the worst part is that you look back and feel like you did not accomplish what you should have. This is not a discipline problem. This is a recovery problem. And this is where the intentional pause changes everything. Because instead of fighting the natural rhythm of your brain, you begin to work with it. You start recognizing the moment where your energy begins to drop, not hours later, not when you are already exhausted, but in the exact moment where the signal appears. And instead of forcing yourself to continue, you stop, not for a long time, not in a way that disconnects you from your responsibilities, but in a very precise and intentional way. You stand up, you step away, you allow your mind to breathe. You look out of a window without searching for anything. You close your eyes for a moment. You let your thoughts slow down without trying to control them. And most importantly, you remove stimulation. No phone, no scrolling, no quick dopamine. Because what your brain needs in that moment is not distraction. It is absence. Absence of noise, absence of pressure, absence of input. And this is where the real difficulty begins. Because when you remove stimulation, you are left with yourself. And for many people, that is uncomfortable. The mind becomes restless. Thoughts start surfacing. There is a subtle urge to escape, to fill the space, to avoid the silence. And once again, most people fail here, not because they do not understand what to do, but because they do not tolerate what they feel when they do it. So they reach for the phone. They check something just for a second. They replace stillness with stimulation. And in doing that, they lose the entire benefit of the pause, because the pause only works when it is real, when it is empty, when it allows your brain to reset instead of consuming more. And when you begin to respect this process, something starts to shift. Your energy becomes more stable throughout the day. Your focus becomes sharper when you return to your tasks. Your mind does not collapse in the middle of the afternoon. You stop operating in a constant state of fatigue, and instead, you begin to move in waves. Strong periods of focus, followed by real recovery. And this creates something that most people never experience: sustainable performance. Not bursts of forced productivity, but a rhythm that you can maintain without burning out. And over time, this habit changes more than your focus. It changes your relationship with time, because you stop trying to extract everything from every minute and start understanding that real productivity is not about doing more. It is about doing better, with a mind that is actually capable of sustaining it. So the next time you feel that drop in energy, that moment where your attention weakens, do not ignore it. Do not fight it. Listen to it, because your brain is not trying to stop you. It is trying to protect your ability to continue. Habit 3, feed your mind. If the first habit gives you control over how your day begins, and the second teaches you how to sustain your energy throughout it, this third habit goes even deeper. It addresses something that most people underestimate, but that silently shapes the entire structure of their mind. What you feed your attention every single day, because whether you realize it or not, your brain is constantly adapting to the type of information it receives. Not occasionally, Not when you are focused, but continuously, every moment you are awake. And over time, this creates a pattern, a mental environment, a way of thinking that is not random, but trained. Now take a moment and look at your daily input with complete honesty. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, what are you exposing your mind to? Short videos, fast transitions, constant stimulation, endless scrolling, fragmented information, content designed to capture your attention, but not to develop your thinking. And this is not accidental. These systems are engineered with precision. They are built to keep you engaged, to keep you consuming, to keep you coming back, not to make you focused, not to make you clear, not to make you disciplined, but to make you stay. And the longer you stay, the more your brain adapts, because your brain is not passive. It does not just receive information. It reorganizes itself based on it. Every piece of content you consume leaves a trace. Every shift of attention creates a pattern. Every repetition reinforces a pathway, and slowly, without you noticing, your brain begins to expect a certain type of stimulation: fast, intense, immediate, emotionally charged. And once that expectation is established, everything else becomes difficult. Reading a book feels slow. Thinking deeply feels exhausting. Staying focused on a single task feels almost impossible. Not because you are incapable, but because your brain was trained to reject anything that does not match the speed and intensity it became used to. This is where most people get frustrated. They sit down to do something meaningful, something that actually requires attention, and their mind simply does not stay. It escapes. It looks for something easier, something faster, something more stimulating, and then they conclude, "I don't have focus." But that conclusion is incomplete, because the real issue is not the absence of focus. It is the conditioning of distraction. Your brain did not lose its ability. It adapted to a different environment. And now, it is operating exactly the way it was trained to operate. So if you want to change your ability to focus, you can not only try harder, you need to change what you feed your mind, because the quality of your attention is directly connected to the quality of your input. And this is where the concept of mental nutrition becomes essential. Just like your body responds to what you eat, your mind responds to what you consume. If you constantly feed it fast, shallow, fragmented content, it becomes fast, shallow, and fragmented. If you feed it depth, structure, and continuity, it begins to rebuild those same qualities. But this requires something that most people avoid: conscious choice. Not consuming automatically, not opening your phone without intention, not allowing every piece of content to enter your mind without filter, but deciding deliberately what deserves your attention. And this does not mean you need to remove everything. It means you need to create balance. Moments where your brain is not overloaded. Periods where you step away from stimulation completely. Time where your attention is not being pulled in multiple directions. Because something important happens when your mind is not receiving input. It starts processing, integrating, connecting. Your brain has systems that only activate in moments of apparent inactivity. Moments where you are not consuming anything. Moments where you are simply present, walking, showering, sitting quietly. And these moments are not empty. They are deeply productive at a neurological level. This is where insights emerge, where ideas connect, where your mind reorganizes itself. But if you fill every second with external stimulation, you eliminate that process completely. You never give your brain the space it needs to think. And over time, you become dependent on input, unable to stay with your own thoughts, unable to sit in silence without discomfort. And this is a signal, a very important one, because the discomfort you feel in silence is not caused by the silence itself. It is caused by everything that has been avoided, everything that has not been processed, everything that surfaces when there is no noise to suppress it. And avoiding that space only reinforces the cycle. So this habit is not just about reducing distraction. It is about rebuilding your relationship with attention, learning to stay, learning to go deeper, learning to tolerate slowness. Because depth requires time, clarity requires space, and focus requires training. And the way you train it is by choosing consistently what enters your mind, not perfectly, not all at once, but gradually, deliberately, every day. Because over time, your brain will adapt again. It will become more stable, more focused, more capable of holding attention. And what once felt difficult will start to feel natural. Not because you forced it, but because you trained it. Habit 4, return to your body. There is a pattern that becomes almost invisible over time. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Most people do not live in their body anymore. They live almost entirely inside their head, thinking, analyzing, projecting, replaying conversations, anticipating problems that have not happened yet, revisiting situations that are already in the past, constantly moving between what was and what could be, but rarely staying in what is. And while all of this is happening, the body is still there, breathing, holding tension, sending signals, but it is no longer being listened to. It becomes secondary, almost like a vehicle that carries the mind from one thought to another. And this disconnection creates something very important at a physiological level. Your nervous system loses one of its main sources of regulation, because the brain does not calm itself only through logic. It does not stabilize itself only through thinking. It depends on signals from the body. Real, physical, present signals that communicate safety, that communicate grounding, that communicate that, in this exact moment, there is no immediate threat. But when your attention is constantly trapped in thought, those signals are weakened. The connection becomes distant. And in the absence of clear signals of safety, the brain assumes something is wrong. It stays alert. It stays tense. It keeps scanning, and this creates a constant background of anxiety. Even when nothing is actually happening, you may be sitting in a quiet place with no immediate pressure, but internally, your system feels activated, restless, unsettled, as if something needs your attention all the time. And this is not just psychological, it is physiological. Your body is holding tension that your mind is not even aware of. Your breathing becomes shallow without you noticing. Your shoulders remain slightly raised. Your jaw stays tight. Your muscles carry a subtle contraction that never fully releases. And over time, this becomes your normal. You forget what it feels like to be fully relaxed, to be fully present, to exist without a constant internal pressure. And this is where the practice of returning to the body becomes essential. Not as something abstract, not as something complicated, but as something very real, very simple, and deeply powerful. It begins with attention, bringing your awareness out of your thoughts and into your physical experience, not trying to change anything, not trying to fix anything, just noticing, feeling your feet touching the ground as you walk, not in a distracted way, but with full attention, feeling the contact, the pressure, the movement, noticing your breath, the air entering slowly, expanding your chest, and leaving without effort, observing tension in your body. Where is it right now? In your shoulders, in your neck, in your jaw, in your chest, and just recognizing it without reacting. Because something important happens when you do this. You interrupt the automatic loop of thought. You shift from mental noise to physical awareness. And this shift sends a powerful signal to your nervous system. A signal that says, you are here, you are present, You are not in danger right now. And this activates a completely different response inside your body. Your breathing begins to deepen. Your muscles begin to release. Your system starts to regulate itself. Not because you forced it, but because you gave it the conditions to do so. And at first, this might feel subtle, almost too simple to be effective. You may think, this is not doing much, but what you are actually doing is retraining your entire response system. Because every time you return to your body, instead of staying trapped in your thoughts, you are building a new pathway, a new way of responding. Instead of being carried away by every thought, you begin to observe them. Instead of reacting immediately, you create space. Instead of escalating internally, you stabilize. And over time, this changes your baseline. You become less reactive, less impulsive, less overwhelmed. Not because your life became easier, but because your system became more regulated. And this affects everything. How you make decisions, how you handle pressure, how you respond to challenges, how you experience your own thoughts. Because when you are disconnected from your body, your mind becomes louder, more chaotic, more dominant. But when you reconnect, the intensity of those thoughts begins to decrease. You are no longer inside them. You are observing them, and that creates distance. And in that distance, there is control. Now here is something very important. This is not something you do once, and it changes everything. This is something you practice, repeatedly, daily, in small moments, throughout your day, pausing for a few seconds, checking in with your body, feeling, observing, returning, again and again. Because the more you do this, the easier it becomes. And eventually, it becomes automatic. You no longer need to remember. Your system starts doing it on its own. And this is when you realize something powerful. You are no longer living only in your mind. You are present, grounded, stable. And from that place, everything changes. Habit 5: commit to discomfort. Up until this point, everything you heard may have made sense. You may have recognized yourself in parts of it. You may have even felt a certain clarity, as if things were finally connecting. But now we reach a point where understanding is no longer enough, because there is a difference, a very clear difference between knowing what to do and becoming someone who actually does it. And this difference is not intelligence. It is not information. It is not even motivation. It is your relationship with discomfort. Because if you look closely at your own patterns, not what you say, but what you actually do, you will start to notice something. You do not stop because you do not know what to do. You stop at the exact moment where it becomes uncomfortable, not necessarily painful, not necessarily impossible, just uncomfortable enough to trigger resistance. It can be something small. The moment where your focus starts fading, the moment where a task becomes mentally demanding, the moment where you feel the urge to check your phone, the moment where you do not feel like continuing. And in that moment, without even thinking too much, you shift, you delay, you escape, you replace what matters with what is easier. And the most dangerous part is not the action itself. It is the justification that comes with it. Because your mind does not present it as avoidance. It presents it as logic. I'll do it later. This is not the right moment. I need to feel better first. I'll start when I have more energy. And all of these thoughts sound reasonable. They sound acceptable. They sound like decisions. But most of the time, they are not decisions. They are exits, subtle ways of leaving the discomfort, without admitting that you are avoiding it. And the reason this happens is not because you are weak. It is because your brain is designed to protect you, to avoid what feels difficult, to move toward what feels easier, to preserve energy, to seek immediate reward. This is not a flaw. This is a survival mechanism. But here is the problem. The same mechanism that protects you from unnecessary pain also prevents you from necessary growth. Because growth, real growth, does not happen in comfort. It happens in that narrow space where something is difficult, but still possible. Where your mind says stop, but you choose to continue. Where your body wants relief, but you stay with the process. And this ability to remain in that space without escaping is what defines transformation. It is what psychologists call tolerance to frustration, the capacity to continue acting, even when the reward is not immediate, even when the motivation is not present, even when the result is not visible yet. And this is where most people fail, not because they are incapable, but because they were never trained to stay. They were trained to react, to seek quick relief, to move away from discomfort as fast as possible. So when they face something that requires consistency, patience, effort, they retreat, and over time, this creates a deeper problem. They stop trusting themselves, because every time you tell yourself you will do something, and you do not, you weaken your own word, not to others, to yourself. And this has consequences, because your mind starts to recognize a pattern. You say you will start, but you do not. You say you will continue, but you stop. You say you will change, but you repeat. And eventually, there is a part of you that no longer believes you, that expects you to quit, that assumes that your commitment is temporary. And this is where true discipline begins, not in doing more, not in forcing yourself aggressively, but in rebuilding trust with yourself through small, consistent, kept promises, doing what you said you would do, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is uncomfortable, even when no one is watching. Because every time you follow through, something shifts internally. You reinforce your identity. You prove to yourself that your word has value. And this creates a completely different type of motivation, not emotional, not dependent on how you feel, but structural, built through repetition. And there is something very important happening at a neurological level when you do this. Every time you complete a task you committed to, even a small one, your brain releases dopamine, not the fast dopamine from distraction, but a more stable form, linked to progress, linked to completion, linked to effort. And this begins to recalibrate your system. You stop depending only on instant gratification and start finding reward in consistency, in progress, in movement, and over time. This builds something that most people think is a personality trait, but it is not. Discipline. Discipline is not something you are born with. It is something you build through repeated exposure to discomfort, without escape. So the real question is not, do you know what to do? The real question is, will you continue when it becomes uncomfortable? Because that moment, the moment where you want to stop, is the exact moment where your life begins to change. Not later, not when it is easier, not when you feel ready, but right there, in that tension, in that decision. And this is where everything becomes very simple. Not easy, but simple. You either continue or you repeat. You either stay or you go back. You either build something new or reinforce what already exists. And no amount of information will replace that choice, because at the end of the day, you do not need more knowledge. You need more execution. You already know more than you apply. What is missing is not clarity. It is commitment. Commitment to continue, even when it does not feel good, even when it is not perfect, even when progress is slow, because the perfect moment does not exist. It will not arrive. Your life will not suddenly organize itself to make change easier. And if you keep waiting for that moment, you will remain in the same place with more time gone and more frustration accumulated. So the decision needs to happen now, with the life you have, with the mind you have, with the conditions you have, now, because in the end, everything comes down to this. You either avoid discomfort, or you use it. You either escape, or you stay. You either remain controlled, or you begin to take control. And a strong mind is not the one that never feels discomfort. It is the one that learned to remain in it. At this point, you already understand something that most people spend years trying to figure out. The problem was never your lack of ability. It was never that you were not capable enough. It was never that you were just like this. What you have been experiencing is the result of a pattern that was built over time through repetition, through exposure, through conditioning. And for a long time, you were living inside that pattern without even seeing it, reacting without realizing, repeating without questioning, blaming yourself for something you were never taught how to understand. But now you see it, and once you see it, you cannot go back to not seeing it, because now you understand that your mind is not fixed. It is not limited. It is not something you are stuck with. It is something that adapts, something that learns, something that responds to what you repeatedly do. And that changes everything, because it means that where you are right now is not where you have to stay. It means that the way you think, the way you react, the way you move through your days can be reshaped, but not through intensity, not through trying to change everything at once, because that is exactly how most people fail again. They try to do too much, too fast, too perfectly, and when they cannot sustain it, they fall back into the same cycle. And then they tell themselves, I knew it would not work, but this time needs to be different. This time, you do not need to change everything. You need to choose one thing, just one habit, the simplest one, the most possible one, the one that you can realistically start tomorrow, without needing motivation, without needing the perfect conditions, without needing to feel ready. And you start there, quietly, without announcing, without overthinking, without trying to be perfect. You just begin. And more importantly, you continue. Because this is where real change happens. Not in the moment of understanding, but in the repetition that follows it. In the small decisions that no one sees. In the moments where it would be easier to stop, but you choose not to. And over time, something begins to shift, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but consistently. Your mind becomes more stable. Your attention becomes stronger. Your reactions become more controlled. And eventually, what once felt like effort becomes natural, not because it became easy, but because it became heart of who you are. And that is the real goal, not to try to be disciplined, but to become someone who acts with discipline, not to try to focus, but to become someone who sustains focus, not to try to change, but to become someone who has changed. And before you leave this moment, I want you to do something simple, but important. Make a decision. Not a big one, not a dramatic one, a real one. Choose the habit you will start. Decide when you will start, and commit to it, even when it becomes uncomfortable, because that decision is where everything begins. And if this message reached you, if at any point you felt that something inside you recognized what was being said, then do not let this be just another video that you watched, understood, and forgot. Take it with you, apply it, test it, live it. And if you are serious about building a stronger mind, a clearer direction, and a life that is not controlled by distraction, then subscribe to the channel, because every single day you will find here content that is designed not just to motivate you, but to reshape the way you think, the way you decide, and the way you act. And if you know someone someone who is stuck in the same cycle, someone who feels overwhelmed, distracted, and unable to move forward. Share this with them, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone is not advice, it is awareness. Now everything is in front of you, the patterns, the habits, the path, and the only question that remains is simple. Will you continue living on autopilot, or will you finally take control of your mind and your life?